Chapter 2. After the End. Snow White and Circe had been reading the book of fairy tales while they were traveling in the Odd Sisters' house. They had been trapped there since the house took them to its place of origin, a place known as the Beginning. Much of the lore surrounding the Odd Sisters' house was a mystery. There were secrets hidden within its walls and its bookshelves and steeped in its very being. One such secret was where the house had been created. The Odd Sisters had introduced a fail-safe when the house was first built. Should anything ever happen to them, the house would take its inhabitants to its place of birth. The sisters wanted to be sure their secrets would be safe should they ever be compromised while away from their home. And that was exactly what happened. Circe and Snow White were inside the house when the Odd Sisters went to the dreamscape, and the house took them to a place outside the many kingdoms. The Beginning was a celestial landscape filled with stars and swirling constellations. They were trapped and had no idea where they were or how to escape. So they occupied themselves by reading the book of fairy tales and the Odd Sisters' journals. They thought perhaps they would find answers in their journals that would lead them back home. They were so worried about everyone in Morningstar Kingdom after their battle with Maleficent. But soon they became distracted by reading Gothel's story in the book of fairy tales. They couldn't believe how deeply the Odd Sisters were involved. Circe was so angry with her mothers, she took away their powers. And then, without explanation, the house released them from the Beginning. With the sudden freedom to travel where their hearts led them, Circe and Snow White wanted to make sure everyone they had read about in Gothel's story was safe. First, their journey took them to Rapunzel, where they saw her happy ending with their own eyes. Then they traveled to check on Mrs. Tittlebottom, a dear old woman who had cared for Rapunzel when she was very young, and who now looked after the bodies of Gothel's sisters, Hazel and Primrose. Once satisfied everyone in Gothel's story was safe, Circe and Snow headed back to Morningstar Kingdom in the aftermath of their battle with Maleficent to see how Nanny, Tulip, and Oberon were faring. Even though what they had learned from reading Gothel's story in the book of fairy tales was still very much on their minds, their hearts were in Morningstar. As Circe and Snow White traveled, they read the ending of Maleficent's story again, just as they were starting their own adventure. Nanny stood among the ruins of Morningstar Castle. The fairy godmother had sent the good fairies off to help Prince Philip fight the dragon and stayed behind to help her sister repair the damages to Morningstar and to tend to everyone's injuries after the terrible battle with Maleficent. "Thank you for your help, sister," Nanny said sincerely. The fairy godmother kissed her sister on the cheek. "It's my pleasure, dear. We have repaired far worse in our time, you and I. I'm just happy no one in the castle was seriously hurt." Nanny looked around, trying to find Tulip. "Are you looking for Princess Tulip?" the fairy godmother asked. "She is with Popinjay. They are doing what they can to help Oberon's army. He lost many friends in his battle with Maleficent." Nanny was heartbroken. Everything had turned to ruins, and the fairy godmother could see the pain in her sister's face. "Don't fret, my dear. You really did all you could for Maleficent. I'm just sorry I never helped you. Perhaps if I had..." Nanny hugged her sister. "Let's not speak of it now. I know your heart. I know." And she cried. She cried harder than she ever had. She had lost so much. She'd lost Maleficent, and she didn't know how to find Circe, who was traveling to places unknown in the Odd Sisters' magical house. "You have me. You will always have me," her sister reminded her. "Speak to Florence. She likely knows more about the lore surrounding the Odd Sisters' house than anyone. I'm sure Circe and Snow will find their way back safely before we know it." "You're probably right, sister. I'd better go help Tulip with the Tree Lords. Perhaps I can heal them with my magic," Nanny said, still looking very concerned. The fairy godmother thought that was a good plan. "I'll stay here and repair the castle." And before she could finish her thought, a magnificent dragonfly appeared with a message from the fairylands. What's this? The fairy godmother opened the scroll and read it. It's from Merryweather. She says Aurora has woken up. Prince Philip has broken the curse. She looked at her sister, knowing the good news also brought heartache. Nanny shook her head. No, I'm happy for the princess and for King Stephen's castle court. I'm sure the good news has brought love and light to everyone in the kingdom, and I'm so glad the princess will be happy. She deserves that. The fairy godmother took her sister into her arms, and, in a way, Maleficent is finally happy. She lives on in her daughter Aurora. Nanny thought her sister was right. That at least gave Nanny peace, for now, until she turned her mind to other matters. But in that moment, she would be happy the princess lived to find true love with her prince, and Nanny was comforted in the knowledge that Maleficent would, in some fashion, live on in Aurora. Even if the histories and books of fairy tales left that part out, she knew, and that was all that mattered. Snow, stop reading, said Circe. It's breaking my heart. Besides, we're almost there. Circe looked out the window of her mother's cottage as it flew through the air. Look, I can see Morningstar. Snow put down the book of fairy tales and looked up excitedly. Oh, are we? Nanny will be so happy to see you. Circe perched her mother's house on the black rocky cliffs that overlooked what had once been the domain of the sea witch, Ursula. The view of Morningstar Castle from the large round kitchen window was a startling sight. Though the lighthouse of the gods stood untouched by the great war between Maleficent and the Tree Lords, the castle was still in despair. The battlements that faced the cliffs were crumbled, lying in heaps at the base of the castle, like broken cyclopean tombstones. Two of the towers were completely destroyed, including the one that had held Tulip's chambers. The sight sent chills through Circe's heart. Well, Circe said quietly, taking in the damage as she prepared some tea for her cousin. At least we were expecting it, and Nanny said Tulip was safe, right? Snow White was sitting on a little red velvet love seat, with a heap of letters on her lap. Looking out the large round window, Nanny's letters and the book of fairy tales said Tulip is well, and that she and the fairy godmother are working to repair the damage to the castle. Circe looked up from the tray of tea and cakes she held and smiled at her cousin. Thank you for going through all those letters and books. Are you sure you wouldn't be more comfortable at home in your own castle? Are you trying to get rid of me already? Snow said, winking at her cousin. Circe set down the tray on the little table and rushed over to Snow. Of course not. I'm so happy you're here. But I'm worried you will be bored, sequestered in the house while I'm at the castle. I know it may seem overprotective, but Nanny really does feel you'd be safer here than at the castle, with my mother's body still in the solarium. Snow smiled. I understand. I have the fairy tale book and all these letters to keep me occupied. Besides, I'm not at all ready to go back to my old life. Not just yet. Snow laughed at the stack of letters. That poor little owl. Nanny must have kept him busy while she was unable to reach us. By the look of it, she sent several letters a day while we were in that strange and beautiful place. The beginning, Circe reminded her. There's so much I don't know about my mother's, or this house. I wonder if the fail-safe spell was reversed when I took away their powers. Snow White smiled at Circe. Well, that is why I am here, to help you in your research. You haven't even had time to process everything that happened to Gothel, let alone Maleficent. There are some things your mother said that I'm finding really curious, and I want to know more. And I know you want nothing more than to go through all these books, but you can't be in two places at once. At least, I don't think you can, Snow said, giving Circe a playful look. So please, let me help you. I'm happy to do it. Truly, I am. Circe poured her cousin a cup of tea and watched her take a sip. You know, that cup used to be yours. I read it in Lucinda's journal, Cersei said. Snow looked at it closely and smiled. I thought so. I'm guessing your mothers, took it from my parents all those years ago? Cersei nodded. I'm still trying to figure out what they were doing with all these cups. Do you think they could just be mementos of their misdeeds? Or is there something more sinister at work? I think I read something about the cups in Maleficent's story, actually. Do you want me to? Before Snow could finish, Cersei snatched the cup from her and threw it across the room. It shattered across the wall. Cersei! Snow was shocked. Cersei, please calm down. Cersei took Snow by the hands, clutching them tightly. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry, Snow. I don't know what came over me. I think I'm much angrier with my mothers than I realized. I understand, sweet Cersei. I do. But please, go see Nanny. She's been so worried about you, and I think it will do you good to see her. I promise I will be fine here. I want to read the rest of the fairy tale book in peace. You're right. I'm sorry. I think seeing Nanny will help. Cersei put her hand on Snow's cheek. My dearest Snow, should I have taken you home after we checked on Mrs. Tittlebottom and her charges? Have I asked too much of you? Won't your husband be worried? Snow White kissed Cersei on the cheek. No, Cersei. My dear sweet husband understands. He's never been comfortable with how close I am with my mother, and I think he is happy that I am finding my independence without her. Cersei was happy to hear that. I'm going to enchant the house while I'm at the castle, Snow. No one will be able to enter. I promise you will be safe. And if you need me for anything at all, you can contact me through the hand mirror. She paused, worried. You're sure you will be okay here alone? Maybe I should try to convince Nanny it's okay for you to come with me to the castle. Snow shook her head. No, I understand completely. Really, Nanny thinks I will be safer here. I get it, Cersei. Please, don't worry. Cersei smiled at her cousin again. She thought Snow had such a beautiful soul. Who else would have dropped her entire life to go on this adventure with her? Who else would have ventured to distant lands to check on the sisters of a terrible witch who kidnapped children, or seen to a sweet, befuddled, elderly woman consumed with baking birthday cakes? Even though Snow was much older than Cersei, it sometimes seemed that she was just a little girl. There was a youthfulness about her that Cersei found utterly charming, a kindness she felt she didn't deserve, not after everything her mothers had done to Snow years ago. Snow had proven that she was a wonderful woman with a forgiving heart, a woman who could forgive even her own mother for trying to kill her. You know, Snow, I truly love you, said Cersei, and I love you too, Cersei. The ladies hugged and hugged. Cersei didn't want to leave Snow. And if you learn anything important in the fairy tale book, you'll let me know? Snow had the book in her hand. She looked down at it. Of course I will. Now go, and give my regards to Nanny. With a kiss for Snow and a protective enchantment on the house, Cersei left for the castle. As she traveled, Cersei couldn't help feeling that her heart was still with Snow. She looked back at her mother's house, silhouetted against the crashing waves, with its witch's cap roof, dark green hue, and black shutters. It was the last place you would expect Snow White to live. Cersei laughed, lost in her thoughts in the beauty of the landscape. She had missed Morningstar, with its brilliant lighthouse and glittering sea. Then, as she neared the castle, and her heart skipped a beat, Cersei would see Nanny and her sister, the fairy godmother, in the distance outside the gates. They looked like they were talking about something important. She sped up her pace, but a voice she hadn't expected to hear startled her. Hello, Cersei. Cersei spun around, wondering where the voice had come from. Then something soft brushed against her legs. It was Flans. The Odd Sister's cat was a tortoise-shell telepathic beauty with orange, black, and white markings. Flans! Cersei squealed with delight, though it seemed Flans wasn't as happy to see Cersei. She just looked up at Cersei with narrowed eyes, shifting her weight from one marshmallow white paw to the other. As long as Circe could remember, Florence had always been there. When Circe was younger, the cat had almost been like another sister, the most level-headed sister in the house, the wisest and most mysterious. There was so much more to Florence than Circe had ever suspected, and it was all in her mother's journals. She had always felt she and Florence had an understanding, but that day, something seemed different. "I'm so disappointed in you, my little one," the cat said, "but there is no time to discuss my broken heart. I must get back to your mothers. They have been waiting for you. We all have." Florence gave her a disapproving look. "I know, Florence. I'm sorry. I was trapped in the beginning." Florence blinked and said, "So, the house took you to the place of its birth, and you took away your mother's powers to get out?" Circe didn't understand what the cat meant. "Of course I didn't, Florence. How was I to know taking away my mother's powers would release us from the beginning?" "So lofty Circe took away her mother's powers for noble reasons. I see. Well, you have much more to learn. When you took away your mother's powers, every spell they had ever cast was broken, including the fail-safe on the house. That's why you were able to return to the many kingdoms. We have so much to talk about, Circe. There's much you need to learn, and not all of it is in those journals. And that fairy tale book Snow White is reading now. If your mothers knew she was in their house, touching their things, do you have any idea how angry they would be, Circe?" Circe was past caring what her mothers thought. "Oh, that's very nice, Circe," said Florence sarcastically. Circe had always thought she and Florence felt the same way about Lucinda, Ruby, and Martha. Of course the cat loved them, but she remembered times when Florence would become so fed up with the Odd Sisters' theatrics that she would leave for days just to get away from them. Now it seemed Florence was more loyal to them than ever. "I have always been loyal to your mother, Circe. Always. Long before you ever came into being. Don't forget that. I saw what they went through to bring you back. I saw them deteriorated into what they've become, all for the love of their precious Circe. You think they've destroyed everyone in their path? You think they're foul, murderous creatures? Well, I could say the same of you. You did this to them, Circe. Your life brought all of this about. If there is nothing good left within them, it's because they gave it all to you. Remember, Circe, you are them. To hurt them would be like hurting yourself." Circe didn't know what to say. Florence's words wounded her deeply, threatening to break her heart into tiny pieces. It felt like one of her mother's mirrors. With each heartbreak, there was another crack in the mirror, and she wondered how long it would be before it shattered entirely. How long before it sliced at her insides like Grimhilda once described in the Book of Fairy Tales. "Do you know why they hate Snow White?" she asked. Florence adjusted her paws, giving Circe one of her characteristic looks. Circe could feel that Florence was surprised she hadn't worked it out on her own. "It was never really about Grimhilda, not until she had your mothers escorted out of the solstice celebration, humiliating them in front of the entire court. That is when their hate switched from Snow White to Grimhilda. They always hated the little brat." "Don't call her that." Florence saw beyond Circe's anger. She saw into her heart. "You have no idea why your mothers wanted to get rid of Snow White, why they still want to see her dead. What did you do the entire time you were trapped in the beginning, if not read your mother's journals? You know nothing of the women you've condemned to solitude. Would you like to come with me to the castle, Florence?" Florence didn't answer. Her silence stung Circe's heart. "And where are my mother's bodies? Are you so angry with me that you've left them alone and defenseless in the solarium so you could condemn me?" Florence didn't answer. "Never mind. But don't think this conversation is over." "Oh, I think it is. If you want to know why your mothers hate Snow White, tell the Brat Queen to look it up in your mother's journals. I imagine she will find it in the section devoted to Grimhilda. I suppose you have one of your mother's mirrors in your pocket so you could contact the Brat Queen?" "I do." "I see. So you're not opposed to using your mother's magic when it suits you. You think you're helping Snow White by keeping her locked away in their house, leaving her alone with only a mirror for comfort and communication? Doesn't that sound like the life you are trying to save her from?" Florence ran ahead before Circe could answer, leaving her feeling desperately sad and alone. She had always thought she could count on Florence, but it was clear something within the cat had changed. Circe missed Snow. They had been together in her mother's house since it spirited them off to the beginning. It felt like a lifetime, but it had all happened in a matter of days. She had felt so far away from Morningstar and from Tulip and Nanny when she was only reading about them rather than being there to help them during the crisis caused by her mothers. And in that moment, Circe realized how much she missed and depended on Nanny, how much she loved her. She felt terrible for leaving her alone to deal with all of this, and she couldn't bear to have Nanny upset with her. She saw her in the distance, and her heart desperately wanted to be with Nanny's. And before she understood what happened, she found herself magically transported into Nanny's arms and showered with love and affection. "Oh, my dear sweet girl, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings when I thought you would be better off if your mother stayed in the dreamscape. You know I only wish to protect you," said Nanny with tears in her eyes, kissing Circe again and again, holding her face between her unbelievably soft hands. "I'm sorry, too. I'm sorry I left you alone, Nanny. I see things much more clearly now. I know something has to be done about my mothers. I know you were only worried about me. I'm so sorry I stormed out like that, leaving you on your own to deal with Maleficent. Can you ever forgive me?" Nanny looked into Circe's sad eyes. "Oh, my darling girl, there is nothing to forgive. The house took you away. You didn't choose to leave. More importantly, what is this delightful advancement in your abilities?" "What do you mean? Did I teleport?" Circe asked, noticing the concerned look on Nanny's face. "I thought you brought me here from across the field." Nanny shook her head. "No, my dear, that was entirely your doing, and I don't think it was teleportation." Circe blinked, confused, but all she could think about now was how happy she was to see her dearest Nanny, who never seemed to change, even in the wake of the dark fairy's death and the near destruction of Morning Castle. Her eyes sparkled with life and love for Circe. "Oh, my dear, I'm so happy you're here. I want to hear all about your adventures with Snow White and what you learned when you read Gothel's story," said Nanny. But before Circe could answer, they were distracted by the fairy godmother, screeching in the distance. "Sister! Sister!" she cried in distress. "We have to go! We have to go!" The fairy godmother wobbled toward them, completely discombobulated. She took several steps in one direction, changed her mind, and then went off in the other direction, back and forth. "Is she okay? What's happened?" Nanny and Circe hurried to the garden, where the fairy godmother was shaking and fumbling with the letter she had just read. "Sister, what's the matter?" Nanny asked. The fairy godmother looked up, her face filled with terror. "Oberon says we have reason to believe the Odd Sisters are trying to lure Maleficent from the other side of the veil to fight at their side." Circe felt her heart seize with panic. "Can they do that? Do they have the power to bring people back from the dead like that?" Nanny frowned. "I don't know, my dear. I don't know. They may." The fairy godmother seemed to notice Circe for the first time. "Oh, Circe, my dear, I'm so happy you're safe. You poor sweet thing. Everything you've gone through." Circe was enveloped in the fairy godmother's arms. She hadn't expected her embrace to feel so much like Nanny's, to feel comforted and loved in the same way. She suddenly felt overwhelmed. Lucinda, Ruby, and Martha had always loved her desperately, loved her too much. This love, the love she felt from Nanny and her sister, was something quite different. It was pure. It wasn't tainted by sacrifice, the insatiable need to protect her at any cost, and Circe wondered if she was worthy of it. Come on, my dear, let's go sit down, Nanny said, leading Circe to the garden outside the conservatory. The conservatory was an architectural marvel of windows and a giant domed ceiling. Large front doors led to a lush garden filled with wandering roses, wisteria, honeysuckle, and jasmine. The scent was so sweet it made Circe's head swim. Once in the garden, they made themselves comfortable under a large blossoming tree filled with delicate pink and blue flowers. I don't remember the tree being these colors, Circe mused. Weren't the flowers white? Nanny laughed and rolled her eyes. This is the 3 good fairies' handiwork. They came back to help after Aurora's wedding. Oh, are they still here? Circe asked, squinting and looking around the garden for them. She didn't know how she felt having so many fairies about. It was strange enough being in the fairy godmother's company. Maleficent's death was still so fresh. Snow was right. She hadn't had time to properly process everything that had happened. Circe felt conflicted about the fairies. If they hadn't been so cruel to Maleficent, she might never have destroyed the fairylands and been forced to turn into the Odd Sisters for help. She would never have created Aurora and lost herself in the process. And Circe's mothers, her meddlesome mothers, if they hadn't manipulated and used Gothel, then Gothel would probably be ruling the Deadwoods with her sisters now. So many things would be different. My darling, it's so much more complicated than that. Quiet your mind. Don't dwell on what might have been. Nanny patted Circe's head tenderly. The 3 good fairies are with Tulip, Oberon, and the Tree Lords, doing their best to heal the wounded. Nanny was eyeing her sister and Circe, clearly worried about both of them. Circe had so many questions, and there was so much to say, but they were being dragged into yet another of her mother's dramas, and she felt she'd better find out what was really going on before the fairy godmother fretted herself into another tizzy. Perhaps we should check in on your mothers in the dreamscape, see what they're up to? Asked Nanny. Circe took her hand mirror from her pocket. She dreaded seeing them just then. But if they were planning to try to lure Maleficent from beyond the veil, that would help her in her decision. She'd been looking the other way for far too long when it came to her mothers, and it was time to put a stop to their antics and skullduggery. Show me the Odd Sisters, Circe spoke, and the words caught in her rapid breath. Rather than showing the Odd Sisters, the mirror filled with familiar green flames. Do you think your mother succeeded in bringing her back? Nanny's face was filled with worry. I will never forgive my mothers if they drag that poor creature back from death. It will break Nanny's heart, thought Circe, grasping the mirror so hard it might have broken. Maleficent, Circe asked, her voice shaking. Is that you? No. A familiar pale face with large dark eyes appeared in the flames. I have not seen the dark fairy in the world of mirrors. I believe she has passed beyond the veil. Grimhilda! Nanny snatched the mirror from Circe's shaking hand. What do you want, witch? My daughter, of course. I'm giving you 1 day to return her to me. If she isn't back home safely within her own castle by this time tomorrow, you will suffer the consequences. Snow will never forgive you if you do this, whispered Circe. How dare you speak for my daughter, you spawn of guile, insanity, wretchedness? Speak to me well. I will rain terror upon your heads if my daughter is not returned to me. You have until tomorrow. The wicked queen's face disappeared into the green mist, leaving the ladies awestruck and afraid.